said is as a sin offering. What was his sin? That he made a golden calf. So this was his atonement. And this is like the first time they're sacrificing at the Mishkan. So it's a big deal. So the first thing Moses is saying is purify yourself before you can purify the people. And also take a ram. And then to the children of Israel, take a goat and a calf and a lamb. And they did everything. And they all stood in front of that, tent. But outside the little fence. And God said that this is the thing that God has commanded, do it, and the glory of God will appear before you. Glory, honor, presence. It's not clear. Glory, that word glory is really mysterious. And Moses says, Aaron, approach the altar and perform your sin offering and your burnt offering, atoning for yourself and for the people, and perform the people's sacrifice, atoning for them. So this is their very first time, all their sins, whatever, they're going to do a sacrifice. So I wanted somebody to read verse 9, because this is sort of what we saw with the horns. So Penina, why don't you read? And Aaron's son
brought forward the blood to him, and he dipped his finger into the blood, placing some on the horns of the altar, and he poured the blood at the base of the altar.
So they're pouring this blood, they're dipping it, and this whole idea is we're not allowed to eat blood, drink blood, have anything to do blood. And then they put the fat and the kidneys and everything, and they burn it. So, okay, this is what we kind of know. And they burn and they burn and they wash this and they wash that. And
they missed something. They slaughtered something in between there.
They slaughtered, but they just slaughtered all these ox and ram and there's peace offerings. So, and again, read this, Penina. 18? Yeah.
And he slaughtered the ox and the ram, the people's peace offering, and Aaron's sons presented the blood to him, and he dashed it on the altar around.
Okay, so Aaron's sons are very important in this story, and you see that they're assisting him from day one. These are the priests. They have a very important role to play. They're the only ones who really can make the sacrifices. Okay, and then I'm going to finish this. Who would like to read? Cindy, why don't you read? And Aaron
lifted up his hands towards the people and blessed them. He then descended from preparing the sin offering, the burnt offering, and the peace offering. Moses and Aaron went into the tent of meeting. Then they came out and blessed the people, and the glory of the Lord appeared to all the people.
So what do you think that means? And I don't necessarily, when the glory of the Lord appeared to all the people, what can you imagine that might mean? What would that be?
I think people they're trying to tell us that these people really did see God. Maybe
they saw something.
They thought they saw something, and it was God.
According to this, they saw something. Maybe it was fire. Some say it was the fire that came down and actually ignited
It represented God in their eyes.
Right. Or some kind of, or it was just that the whole experience was the glory of God. But in some way they saw God. And God keeps, in the story revealing himself to the people, and they still keep complaining, and they're never satisfied, and they're always doubtful.
Could it have been some kind of prop that Aaron and his sons set up to impress the people?
Well, I don't know if it was a prop, but it's possible that they ignited the incense inside and then smoke came out, because we saw how there was that smoke coming out of the tent in that illustration. And so they saw this smoke suddenly appearing.
But something prearranged by Aaron to impress the people.
It's
not from God, but just from Aaron mostly.
Yeah, go ahead.
One could imagine some kind of sparklers or magical smoke or colored smoke being produced, and just imagining people that aren't as sophisticated as we sit here today, that might look quite godly or magical.
Are you suggesting, Eric or Ben, that Aaron and Moses are knowingly hoaxing the people, creating a hoax, or
We're just trying to impress and
Yes.
put them on the right path.
But
Something that comes out of this that makes them think that there he is, there she is, that there it is.
Or something as simple as a method to get their attention.
Yeah.
I'm not saying they're charlatans or something, snake oil salespeople, but that they're, look at me. I've got these fancy sparkling objects.
okay, Susan?
Okay, I'm unmuted. I don't think it was a hoax because they said that all that Moses and Aaron walked out and then the presence of God appeared. Well, when Moses got the 10 commandments and came down, the presence of God, the people saw that in the radiance of his face. The Karen, the horns, later translated as horns, but which was also a halo or light. And I think that suggests that God was with him, Moses and Aaron, and it could have been a striking light and a brilliance that was with them.
I think, this story was written, way after it occurred, and it's, I don't know that we take it literally, but in the story, when you sacrifice, and the first time you sacrifice, God's presence appeared. And I want to just keep that in mind, because now we come to the big drama that I want to talk about, and it's here. And Ben, why don't you read? And I even put it in bigger print because it's so important. Okay.
And reading here at number 1.
Yeah, Aaron's son.
And Aaron's sons, Nadab and Abihu, each took his pan and put fire in them and placed incense upon it. And they brought before the Lord strange fire, which he had not commanded them. And fire went forth from before the Lord and consumed them, and they died before the Lord. And to
wait, this is wrong. This is the wrong thing. I skipped a line. All right, let's just leave that. I don't know where that's wrong. Okay. And they died. So these two young guys, after they had done this whole sacrifice, go in, I think they go into the incense part, and they add incense, and no one told them to do it. They say strange fire, and they're burned immediately. They're burned up, like the flame jumps and burns them up. So why? What do you think they did that happened? Okay, Ben.
Well, I think that, I don't want to say proves my point, but may substantiate my point that there was some kind of chemical reaction in this special magical fire that was being used for demonstration purposes, and these two inexperienced kids tried to mess with it, and the next thing they knew, they were burned up. They didn't know how to handle it.
Okay, Penina.
I think the presentation of the ark and all these new rituals were exactly what it is. It's a new ritual. And there is a new generation now. That's why they're reminding us, Aaron and his sons. And this generation may have not experienced when they crossed the Red Sea. And the Red Sea was actually an open war against God. Pharaoh was the God, our God took them out of there, and they all drowned, and there was a superiority there that was actually felt by all of them. They came out of it. Now there is a new generation. And you have to kind of like pinpoint the greatness of God again, but it's a different God now. One that they didn't see when the Red Sea was passed by or crossed by or used to free them. So that's why they have all these little things of reminder of the old, because they need to be relating it somehow now to this new idea. And and the fact that they're mentioning now the sons, it's purposed directly to the new generation. They have to show the greatness of God in some way. So now they are sacrificing the actual, what considered to be a God before, the lambs, the bull, the thing, and that.
I understand what you're saying. However, chronologically, it only took them 7 weeks to get to Sinai. It's not the 40 years. They haven't been condemned to the 40 years.
So
the
whatever it is, it's a reminder.
Yes, but so the rabbis, all the commentaries for like years and years said, what did they do? So here I have some possibilities that I found that I wanted to share with you and see what you think about this. So who would like to read? Douglas, you want to read? Yes, no, because I can't see everybody. Anybody else want to read? Merle.
Which one, commentary?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll read it.
You read. Let's have somebody else read.
Okay.
I can read this and then I have to go.
Go
The
ahead.
Torah narrates the death of Nadib and Abihu very briefly, never telling us exactly what they did to cause them to be struck down. Therefore, commentaries over the generations have used their imaginations to speculate about what grave sin they might have committed. So do I do the first one? They brought the instruments for making fire into the tent, not realizing that God was miraculously going to send fire from heaven on this special occasion. Because they were too close to the fire, they were killed. Their sin, if any, was a lack of faith by trying to help God when God didn't need any.
So that's kind of weak, but okay, that's one.
Yeah, but it kind of makes sense if you broaden it out as far as God not being interested in their help.
Or yes, and also the fire was too powerful, which is kind of what Ben said as well. So that's one. I'm going to ask you which ones you like. So Cindy, you want to read?
I've already read.
Oh, who else would like to read? Brad, and you have your hand up.
Okay.
Brad, did you want to say something?
Well, I was going to comment before, but I'll read now. Other commentaries find the brothers guilty of egotism. Each took his own fire pan without consulting each other or their father. Others say they were drunk, which explains verse 9 about not drinking wine before entering the sanctuary.
That comes up later. Go ahead.
Or they were dressed too casually and showed disrespect for their surroundings.
Okay, read one more, Brad.
Others accuse them of impatience to succeed Moses and Aaron as leaders of the people. The strange fire was the fire of ambition, which prompted them to say, when will these old men, our fathers and our uncle, die already so we can take their place?
Okay. Now, I love this one because it's the exact opposite. One intriguing interpretation see them as motivated by excessive piety. Out of their love for the divine, they came too close to God, who was like a raging fire. They had passion for closeness to God that God did not command them because it was too dangerous. So what I find interesting is one commentary says they were egotists that wanted to take power, and the other one says they were so spiritually religious they wanted to be close to God and give their own sacrifice or add their own incense to it. And this strange fire is never explained. So what reactions do you have to any of these possible interpretations, or do you have another one? Cindy?
Well, often they make a prohibition against something because it was happening. So if they later are making the prohibition against drinking before entering, perhaps they had wine or they were drunk, because then they later say, don't do it.
That's right. That's exactly what the rabbis say. And it's like a couple verses later, God says, do not drink wine when you're going to go into the sanctuary, out of the blue. So then you think, well, were they drunk? And maybe they got too close. You know what I mean? Possibly. Susan.
Yes. One thing, I can lower this hand. God also struck down the two carriers in David's time when they were moving the ark, the two carriers.
Right.
who were transporting the ark, and one of them understandably thought the ark was going to trip, the ox tripped, and that he thought he was going to save the ark, and propped it up, and he was struck down. So it happens before. But I like all of these interpretations. I think they all make some sense. But today, in the Jonathan Sachs commentaries that come out in the Parshat, he had, I thought, a brilliant commentary, and he relates it to passion. And passion, he said, quoting 17th century Scottish philosopher David Hume, that in the 17th century, the 1600s, passionate in regard to religion was regarded as excessive and dangerous because it led to all sorts of overextension, and even he brings up arrogance and thinking that you don't have to obey the rules because you are so close to God. And he suggests that as not an alternative, but an extension of what you were saying, that passion, fiery emotions, and we know how some religions can become so passionate that they can become dangerous. So,
Like the Inquisition. Yeah.
what?
The Inquisition, she said.
Yes, certainly.
Exactly.
And
Or-
so that he was bringing that up and relating it to earlier philosophers' fear of excessive religious passion, fiery, and of course they're offering fire, and fiery can relate to the emotions as well.
Yes, thank you. That's really interesting. Now, there's a section that we're going to read after, but I have the commentary here that we're going to look at, was that they were not literally burned up, because it says Moses commands Aaron had 4 sons. So then he commands the other 2 to drag these 2 brothers away by their tunics, like away from where they had been burned, which suggests their bodies were not immolated and there was still something there. So then another midrash or commentary suggests this. So Rebecca, you never read. You want to read? Hold on, I'm gonna share screen. Here we are. And hold on. Okay. Number 5.
There is a rabbinic legend that the fire consumed their souls, but not their bodies.
Hello?
Thus they could be dragged away with their tunics.
Okay, keep going.
Along these lines, it was suggested that they suffered a spiritual death in their lifetime and no longer able to feel holiness or reverence in filling out their duties. They were emotionally burned out and their souls had shriveled, even as they continued to go through the motions of religious ritual.
So that's kind of like an idea that, they didn't die, but they died inside, but we never hear from them again. So that's probably not. Okay, now this is the text. Susan,
Sure.
number 4.
Then Moses said to Aaron, "This is what the Lord spoke when he said, I will be sanctioned through those near to me."
Sanctified.
Sanctified, of course. And before all the people I will be glorified. And Aaron was silent.
Okay, so what does that mean, do you think? I will be sanctified by all those who are near me and glorified. And Aaron didn't say anything. So does he mean that these guys were sanctified, or was their punishment a kind of a sanctification for the rest of the people? I mean, or were they made holy, or were they, there's a commentary that was their punishment because I'm holy, and when you transgress, I show my greatness, or something like that in front of the people. And then Aaron says nothing. His sons were just killed in front of him. So what do you make of that? Why would you think he didn't say anything? And why do you think the Torah mentions it? It's significant. The Torah says, and Aaron was silent. So what do you think? Susan?
There's several things here. The first one, going back to the first thing about being sanctified, it could be, and I read this somewhere, that God sanctifies those who obey his instructions. So that, and Nadav and Abihu did not. So, I mean, that I heard that as one thing. But then what does one say when one's sons are killed, two sons killed in front of you and in such a dramatic way?
Aaron might have just worried about being killed himself in the same way if he said the wrong thing.
It could be. Certainly it could. I mean, he was a dumbstruck, as the saying goes. I mean, we don't use that expression anymore, but that it was so profound and so dramatic in their immolation that what could he say? And sometimes silence is very speaking. A silence tells things.
Eloquent, can be eloquent, is what you're saying.
Eloquent, yes.
Ben.
Well, I think it goes back to God proving that he is, number one, do as I say, follow my commandments, follow my instructions. And if you don't, you become lifeless or soulless or whatever. And I think Aaron was just so awe-inspired, the awe of that was so much he wasn't going to speak up. You accept it. Okay, God is everything. And you gotta live with it. Trust it.
That's interesting. Yeah. Okay, Brad.
Well, I probably mentioned this before, but what this makes me think of is Eric Auerbach's a wonderful book, classic book called Mimesis, where in the first chapter he compares the Bible to Homer. And he says what's significant about these two strands of realism is that in Homer, we know exactly what all of these characters are thinking. And in the Bible, we have no idea what they're thinking. And this is a perfect example of that. We have no idea what God is thinking. We have no idea what Aaron is thinking. And we can only project onto it our own emotions at a moment like this. And it's for that reason that we have so much literature over the years trying to make various efforts to interpret these scenes, which are just a mystery to us when you come down to it.
You're right. And I just want to say before I respond to that part, the Torah, we rarely hear what people are thinking, but in the rest of the Bible, especially in the early prophets, like the story of David, the story of the judges, there's a lot of inner information and thinking of what they were thinking, but it's a totally different author. It was the Deuteronomist author, and that's what's so marvelous, I think, about the book of Samuel, for example, because they're constantly sharing what they're thinking and then what their motivations are. But you're right. But the fact that they say and Aaron was silent is significant. And is it, as we said, what can you say? Or I dare not say? Or when Moses says, this is what God says about showing my glory, Aaron says, well, no comment. Meaning I don't agree. By being silent, you say no comment. Or another possibility that came to me is that he had sinned with the golden calf. And so maybe he felt he didn't have any right to speak up at this moment because of what he had done and how, he didn't have any money in the bank with God, so to speak. You know what I mean? He didn't have that relationships to even weep. He didn't even cry or weep. Maybe he did privately, and Aaron was silent is a very powerful sentence. Okay, Penina.
Which everything that was said here is like so much included into what I'm trying to say right now, is you cannot really tell unless you look at the result.
Right.
When you look at the result, then you know what the people did or what the people response was to what they did, because there is no early and late in the Torah. So what happens on this particular moment could have been the ground to a law that became, that you read about, that you think came like maybe 10 years later. What are we getting something out of it that's, you just look what happened after, what was the result. Then you can start thinking, oh, because of this, because but the main thing is that there was a result. Look at the result.
Thank you. Okay, let's go and continue, because it's so interesting what's in this exact same parsha with this death of these sons. Okay, and let's just, here's more of the story. Who hasn't read? Kimberly, you're there. You want to read? Hello? I can't see everybody on this thing, so I don't know who's there.
Which part you want?
Hold on a second. Let me just.
Oh, I couldn't unmute. I was trying to say I wanted to pass. I have a really bad sinus headache.
Oh, okay. So who hasn't read? Douglas, do you want to read? And then Eric? Douglas, then Eric. Okay, so here we go. Okay, Douglas. Right there. Douglas, can read? No. Eric, do you want to read?
Sure.
Okay.
And Moses summoned Mishael and Elzapam, the sons of Aaron's uncle Uzziel, and said to them, "Draw near, carry your kinsmen from within the sanctuary to the outside of the camp."
So these are the dead bodies they're talking about. Go ahead.
So they approached and carried them, that's the dead bodies, with their tunics to the outside of the camp, as Moses had spoken. And Moses said to Aaron and Eleazar and Ithamar and his sons,
Those are his two other sons, Eleazar and Ithamar. Go ahead.
"Do not leave your heads unshorn, and do not rend your garments, so that you shall not die, and lest he be angry with the entire community. But your brothers, the entire house of Israel, shall bewail the conflagration that the Lord has burned."
So he's saying to them, don't mourn that you may die, but other people can. I'm not sure what this means really.
It's the clothing. The clothing has something to do with it.
But do not leave your heads unshorn. You know, don't let your hair grow like you do. You don't shave when you're in mourning, and don't.
Because it's flammable.
So you shouldn't die, and do not lest God be angry with the entire community. But your brothers, and they should all cry. Nobody should mourn these people. Continue, Eric.
"And do not go out of the entrance of the tent of meeting, lest you die, because the Lord's anointing oil is upon you." And they did according to Moses' order.
Okay, so this is what I get from this. They were inside that tent. Remember the enclosure? That's where it happened. They're saying, don't walk out all wailing and crying so everybody knows what happened. They're kind of, and to get those bodies out of here. So it's kind of like undercover. They're trying to sort of cover it up so people won't get hysterical. So that's what I read from this. You know, that nobody saw it except the people that, Moses, Aaron, and the other priests, the brothers and the family, the Levites inside. Okay, go continue, Eric.
"And the Lord spoke unto Aaron, saying, Do not drink wine that will lead to intoxication, neither you nor your sons with you, when you go into the tent of meeting, so that you shall not die. This is an eternal statute for your generations, to distinguish between holy and profane, and be clean, unclean, and clean."
Okay, so the whole incident is kind of like happened inside the tent, that it seems that no one saw. It was only Aaron and his other sons and maybe his brother or whatever, they were in there, and Moses. Miriam is not in there. And take the bodies and take them outside the encampment, get rid of the bodies so there was something left. And also dead bodies are unclean, and priests are not even allowed to touch dead bodies. A priest, Kohanim, aren't even allowed to go to cemeteries because they have to be in a state of cleanliness at all times to bless the people. So the fact that they dragged them by their clothes, they didn't touch the corpses. You know what I mean? So they pulled them out and they said, no crying, no mourning, no wailing, quiet. And let's just get on with it. And right after this comes the laws of kashrut in the text. Right after this are suddenly these laws about keeping kosher, which is like another version of cleanliness and uncleanliness. Susan, do you have your hand up? Yeah, you're muted. You're muted.
I am so glad you brought that up because the text is contradictory. They carried the body or the tunics outside the camp, but no one's supposed to see them. So how is that done? So I'm glad you mentioned that because I had never thought of that. And then the other thing is, won't the people know that these two sons of Aaron are dead? And what about his wife, Elisheva? Isn't she gonna, like Sarah, what's happened to my sons?
Well, I'm sure.
Is there a midrash on that?
I haven't found one, but that's a good point. But I think this is kind of an Iliad Odyssey story where you don't ask.
You don't ask these questions.
You don't ask these questions. It's like, don't even go there because the backstory, who knows? But you're right. How would they, where are they? Suddenly they're gone. Or they may have said they died, but not how they died and what they were doing when they died. They could say, oh, there was a tragedy and they died but the fact that Moses is saying, don't even mourn them, and I always find it so interesting that Moses' sons are nowhere to be found in any of this. They're not heirs to anything. They don't do anything. We don't even know what happened to them. We know his wife. Later we hear something about his wife, but we never hear about his sons after their birth. So, yes, Brad?
Yeah, that's so interesting that you said, Rabbi, that we go from here into the rules of kashrut, because that sentence there about the drinking, is that looking forward? Is that anticipating the kosher rules? Or is that looking backwards and giving us an explanation of what these two boys did wrong? Were they inebriated? So it just adds more to the mystery of what really happened there.
Yes, and suddenly it's like they were unclean, the bodies are unclean, and actually in the next parsha, which is Matzriah, is all about leprosy and illness making you unclean, and even your house having mold, and that's unclean. One second, Penina. And now I want to say that we're going to look at the laws of kashrut in 1 second, but already they have been told earlier, this is like the third level of kashrut. The first one was, do not boil a kid in its mother's milk. That was earlier, which means the rabbis say you can't mix milk with meat. And that was the separation of dairy and, meat. And the next one was you shall, or maybe even before that was you shall not consume blood. I think not consuming blood was actually first. You're not allowed to eat blood, drink blood. You have to get rid of blood from your food. Your meat has to, they're always pouring out the blood and the understanding is it's the life force. The blood is the life force, and we don't drink or eat that. And then the next one is do not boil a kid in its mother's milk. So you don't mix milk with meat. And now it's actually like these are the animals you can eat, and these are the ones you can't eat. And there's no explanation.
Yes, there is.
Okay. Go
Okay.
ahead, Nina.
I'm sorry that it's just that it came to me.
Go ahead.
When you said that we have to remember that God is presented not just as a real sadistic or a strong force that only wants to kill and burn. We always when we pray, we say El Maleh Rachamim, God who is full of mercy.
Right.
And it's very good that the kashrut came right after that, because the law of how to kill the calf, the way that the slaughter is supposed to be, what makes it kosher is that they slaughter it in a way that the animal doesn't suffer while this process of dying is happening.
Right,
And
but
that's
it's not in
also
this
the
parsha.
fact that you're not eating the baby with the mother while he's still nursing. It's also because the baby is going to die from lack of food. It's suffering, and the cow is going to be also suffering for thinking that her calf is not going to be able to have her milk. So I think we have to remember that God is not presented in the Torah only as a mean, vindictive, cruel person that's just supposed to punish you all the time. You're also praying El Maleh Rachamim. That's why we say that prayer all the time. It's God who is going to reward you, and God who also is merciful. Otherwise, people would never going to choose to believe in a God that's only going to burn them and kill them and stuff like that. And that's why I think it's the point where Moses was trying to keep this in perspective. So the God that he was thinking of, because of the 10 Commandments, we know that he was thinking of that, is that not only a God who punishes you all the time, it's also a God who is going to be thoughtful and merciful. And the prayer, again, I'm repeating, El Maleh Rachamim. It's in the Torah for a
many
reason.
times.
Nothing was put in there without a reason. It's the lesson, always a lesson. It's not just that one bad one. It's the one who really actually felt sorry for you in Egypt.
You don't have to defend God.
Okay.
Because honestly, I think in the ancient world, the threat of punishment was one of the most strong ways to get people to live a certain, if they were trying to have them live a holier life or a more elevated life or a less criminal life.
Exactly.
Seemed that, all of this punishment was what impressed them or not. We certainly, the idea of God evolves.
Or scared of.
The idea of God evolves through the Bible, the whole Bible. You can't just look at the Torah. The Torah is the earliest, and it keeps evolving and changing and changing and changing until, we see in the book of Isaiah where God says, I don't want your sacrifices and fasts. I want you to, clothe the naked and feed the hungry and take care of the widow and orphan. That's the kind of fast I want you to do. Fast from your arrogance and greed.
Did you know that the giraffe is kosher? And did you know that nobody kills it because they don't know exactly where to cut it to be actually with the law? That's why the giraffe is being spared out of being eaten, because nobody wants the Orthodox regulations. They cannot tell which part in their throat will be the kosher way to do it. So they're just not killing them, but they're kosher.
They're too beautiful. Okay, let's just look. We have like another little while to look at the kosher laws, which suddenly appear after this whole thing. Okay, this is blah, blah, blah. Yeah. This is more about giving the laws of kashrut. Okay. Who would like to read? Ben, why don't you read? If you're there.
Thank you. And I'm here. I was doing some chat GBT research on some of your comments, Rabbi.
Okay.
Okay, the laws of kashrut. And the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron to say to them, speak to the children of Israel, saying, these are the creatures that you may eat among all the animals on earth. Any animal that has a cloven hoof that is completely split into double hooves and which brings up its curd, that one you may eat.
It's cud. It's cud.
Cud.
Okay.
Curd, okay, cud. But these you shall not eat among those that bring up the cud and those who have cloven hoof, the camel, because it brings up its cud. It does not have a completely cloven hoof. It is unclean for you. And the hyrax?
I have no idea what this is, the hyrax.
Because it brings up its cud, but will not have a completely cloven hoof. It is unclean for you. And the hare, because it brings up its cud, but does not have a completely cloven hoof, it is unclean for you. And the pig, because it has a cloven hoof that is completely split, but will not regurgitate its cud, and it is unclean for you. And you shall not eat their flesh, and you shall not touch their carcasses. They are unclean for you.
So even like the dead animals, there's a lot of stuff about not touching dead bodies, dead animals. Okay, and then might as well do the fish.
Okay, among all creatures that are in the water, you may eat these. Any of the creatures in the water that has fins and scales, those you may eat, whether it lives in the waters, in the seas, or the rivers. But any creatures that do not have fins and scales, whether in the seas or in the rivers, among all creeping creatures in the water, and among all living creatures that live in the water, they are an abomination for you. And they should be an abomination for you. You shall not eat of their flesh, and their dead bodies you shall not hold in abomination.
So shrimp, lobster, clams, oysters,
Scallops
you cannot eat. Now, I before we talk about this, I just want to show you something else that I didn't know. However, among all the flying insects that walk on four legs, you may eat from those that have a jointed leg like extensions above its regular legs in which they hop on the ground. From this locust category, you may eat the following: the red locust after its species, the yellow locust after its species, the spotted gray locust after its species, and the white locust after its species. Aren't you happy to know that we can eat locusts?
Escargot.
I think they're chocolate covered. They're very good.
But insects have 6 legs, not 4.
Well, I don't know, these spotted or whatever these particular locusts. I've never been. Does a grasshopper have 6 too?
The grasshopper, I know that it was edible, because when they flocked the field, people used to go out with baskets and pick them up and eat them.
Oh, God. All right. So what do you think, or do you think, in the last few minutes, is there any value in having these dietary laws? And I'm not talking about back then when you could say, well, it wasn't healthy, though I don't know the difference between preserving like pig meat and cow meat would be that different. So do you think there's any value? Do you think kashrut today has any value? I'm curious what you think.
It does.
Okay, I just want to hear, I know you have really good opinions, but I'd like to hear anybody else first. Anybody have an opinion? Brad, you always have some thoughts.
Well, yeah, but I don't know if they're worth sharing. No, I don't observe the kosher rules, so for me they're somewhat irrelevant to my life. But I do want to ask you, Rabbi, if you think there's any connection between these, the segue into the kosher rules and the story that we began with about Aaron's sons. Is there a relationship between these 2 parts of this? I assume we're in the same parsha.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what is the connection? Is there one?
Cleanliness and uncleanliness, purity and impurity. The body was impure, the fire was strange. There's something about separating yourself, what you do and what you consume seem to be, some kind of symbolic way of being pleasing in God's eyes or holiness. Like it's not just what you do, they're saying what you put into your body or what you eat or how you treat animals. I mean, we could I don't think the rabbi, I haven't found any commentary on why they're in the same thing. It seems to be because they say you'll be unclean. They say if you mourn, if you do this, it's all about uncleanliness and cleanliness. And let me just say, the word is not clean like dirty. It's tahor, which means pure and kind of holy, and tameh, which kind of means untouchable or objectionable. It's not really unclean. There's something else about it. Pnina.
Okay, it's all about choices. That's the idea of Yom Kippur. We are not animals and we are not machines. And Yom Kippur's come to tell the world that, to remind people that they are not machines and they are not animals. They can think and they can decide whether to eat and what not to eat. And the ability to think and choose, that's what is emphasized here. Remember, you're not a machine. You're not doing things automatically. You are controlling your actions.
Yes.
And also the same idea with the feelings. You are not an animal. You are a person. You are given the mind and you can think and feel. And that's what makes us different. And the kosher laws is to remind us. And Yom Kippur is to remind us. We are not machines and we are not animals.
Okay.
We can think.
Okay.
We can feel. We make decisions.
I also think there has been the suggestion in terms of the kashrut laws, it makes it more difficult to eat with the pagans because we can't eat a lot of the things they ate. And the Philistines apparently worship the pig as one of their sacred animals. And so we didn't want to have anything to do with touching the pig because of that. And, but this idea that you're separate, but it seems there's and you know, Orthodox people will say you can't question it. It's just one of those laws you're supposed to follow.
That's not good. You're supposed to think and choose.
I know. I'm just telling you, it's called a chok. There is a new kind of kashrut today called eco-kashrut, which is that you want to make sure that not as only is the animal slaughtered in a humane way, but it's raised in a humane way. It's not some people will not eat eggs or chickens that are kept in crowded coop. That's their kosher.
Exactly.
You know, so there's it keeps evolving. My feeling about kosher is whether we like it or not, it's so integral to Jewish identity that we are aware of it. I mean, it's so ancient that we follow some of it, or certainly a lot of people do something because it's just so part of being Jewish. Not eating pork, not eating shellfish, not whatever you do or not. You don't have to, because that's the great thing about Judaism. I think that you don't have to, but some people choose to just because it's kind of identifies you with a very ancient Jewish tradition. And certainly as a rabbi, I feel I have an obligation to uphold that tradition to some degree for my community. You know what I mean? Nobody wants to see their rabbi eating a bacon cheeseburger, even if they do it. They don't want to see you doing it because you're the rabbi and you should uphold Judaism in some way. And I sort of understand that thinking. But the logic behind it, we don't really know. The rabbis try to explain it, but we don't really know. And on that question, I'm going to wish you all Shabbat Shalom. And it's lovely to study with you. And I will see you next time. Shabbat Shalom, everyone.
And Rabbi,
Thank you, Rabbi.
Rabbi, I'd love to take you out for a bacon cheeseburger.
No.
We could go for a vegan bacon cheeseburger. Bye.
Thank you.